not as dark. So what I want to do is make the ambient occlusion, it's fake shadows, contact shadows, to be lighter shade of gray, because this is pitch black. So, right, shot 8. I'm gonna put another little side note and put down shadow color pure black. Okay, and then go for my ambient occlusion, set the black to something lighter, like here. This is for shadow color. See? Maybe like that. At least this much. Now I'm gonna press 1 to 1. I'm gonna do a render. Control U. Before, after. So it may not look like a lot, barely noticeable maybe. I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna select snapshot 9. I'm gonna type in AO fall off at 3, AO shadow color to lighter gray. Right. Okay. So that's what that was. Alright, so next, and I want to change the cylindrical wall, right? To be a lighter shade of gray. So right around here. So instead it was here, I'm going to increase it to like here. So lighter. Also make sure your specular's weight is down to 0 if you haven't already. Press 1 to 1. I wrote my little notes for snapshot 9. Press Control U. Before, after. Before, after. You notice how it also made the contact shadow tighter. See? So I'm gonna save a snapshot. I'm gonna say save snapshot 10, where I'm gonna write down wall color change to a lighter shade of gray, maybe leaning towards more white-ish. There. So that's what I did. So basically I'm just showing these things where how helpful they are. You know? See? There. Alright, next. So this here, the wall, right? I want to mess around with the walls subdivision, right? It's mesh. I'm gonna mess around with it to mess around with the mesh and change it. Right, the density of the mesh. I'll talk about why. So this is the wall, right? And here, Control Alt 5, you can see it. Right, I'm gonna select the wall from the outliner, and the attribute editor, go to smooth mesh. Default, you may or may not have it at 3. the default value is 2, but increase it to 3. If you increase it to 3, right, watch. This is 2, this is 3. If I show the display subdivisions, right, 2 is this, 3, it makes it more dense. So it ups the polygon count and makes for the renders to be smoother for the wall, because you may or may not see artifacts, banding on the wall. If you see banding on the wall, right, due to the shadows and stuff, then you need to go in, increase the division levels to 3. Just trust me on this, it does make a difference, blah blah blah. I'll just turn that off. So that's what this is. I'm gonna strike it through. See, right here. Smooth mesh, right? Subdivision levels, 3. Alright, we're almost done. This here, final output, render settings part 2, Arnold render tab, right? I'm gonna click on the Arnold render tab, right? The render panel, render settings. Go to the Arnold render tab over here, right? The sampling, let me close this. Sampling is how nice the render looks like, the final render. Camera AA. I used to wonder, what the hell does this mean? Like, what are you talking about? AA. What does AA mean, and what does it have to do with the camera? Basically, whatever the hell the camera is seeing, right? So, for example, this is the render, the perspective camera that I'm using to do the shot renders. Whatever this camera is seeing, right? AA stands for anti-alias. Basically, the renders, do they have jaggedy lines, right? If they do, that's because it's a low value of 3. That's what AA stands for, anti-alias camera. You want to set to like 8. And you notice here these numbers start to change. So I don't want to talk about these numbers. Basically, it just ups the ante of it so that the render will look crisp. So press 1 to 1. If yours doesn't look like this, you might have the alpha turned on, right? Just in case, you just never know. I just checked to see if I saved it, right? The previous render I'm talking about. Now I'm going to do Control U. So you will notice it's going to take longer, right? 14 seconds. Previous render was only 3 seconds. This one took 14 seconds, right? Because of the camera AA. They increased, see where the lines and stuff to be crisp. So I'm gonna zoom in, right? Before, after, before, after, before, after. If I zoom in, before, you see, this is the anti-alias. When I say jaggedy lines, here's your jaggedy lines. Before, after, before, after, before, after. See, before, muddy and kind of muddy pixelation. After, crisper. The jaggedy lines are crisper and cleaner. Before, after, before, after, before, after, much cleaner. That's what I'm saying. Now hit the save the camera snapshot. Snapshot 11. Select it. Type in here. Camera AA sampling set to 8. Right. So this, hopefully you can see that there's a clear, methodical changes that are being done step by step. Very logical, right? But that's the one thing you need to get out of this, is that it's very step by step and very logical. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about, right, is the ray depth. Default is 1 and 1, right, but I jacked it up to 3 and 3. So I'm going to show you what this does. Let's go to our auto render tab, ray depth. Set this to 3 and 3. Okay, this means how many light bounces, right? It's gonna bounce 3 times. Indirect illumination 3 times, or also known as global illumination, blah 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 blah. I'm gonna hit render. Make sure you save your snapshot. Control U. So it's going to take some time. 12 seconds, 13 seconds, 14 seconds, 15 seconds, 16, 17. Shouldn't be taking so long. 20 seconds. You notice it's much brighter. Before, after, before, after, before, after. If you look at the contact shadow, tightens up. I want to save it. Before, after. Select it. Mine is snapshot 12. In here on the comment, I'm gonna write down ray depth 3 by 3. Basically, diffuse at 3, specular at 3. You know what? I'll write it down. There. Okay, so a huge difference. I have to show this because unfortunately there still are students that are not fully aware of this, right? So if I'm boring you to death, too bad. In here, now I'm gonna turn on motion blur, right? Motion blur. Before I even turn it on, I need to show I'm gonna go back a couple of frames mid-flight, right here, right? So before I turn it on, to show before and after, basically is what I'm saying. Control U, make sure you save your render from before, right? Because I know I did. Control U. So here's the render getting cooked, right? 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds. Again, this is GPU, right? With a RTX 3090, which was the, okay, good, 15 seconds. So here it is. I'm gonna save it. Snapshot 13. Under comments, I'm gonna write down no motion blur turned on. Okay. Now I'm gonna turn it on. Leave everything else alone. Right? I saved it, the snapshot from previous, right? So you could see the notes. Now I'll do a Control U to do a render. Alright, so 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 seconds. And here's your motion blur. Before, after, before, after. So Oh, I need to save a snapshot. Here I'll write down motion blur turned on. Okay, there you go. So we did that, enabled it. Make sure to check that you're under imagers, your denoiser turned on. Chances are it is, but just to make sure. Denoiser. What this does is it takes away noise or the pixels being muddy or you know, things like that. So this is also so good. A couple of years ago, or many years ago, it didn't have this, and now we do, and makes the renders go by so much faster too. On top of the GPU rendering speed, it adds to it. So that's your denoiser. Other 3D software also have this as well, whether it be Blender or whether it be 3D Studio Max or whatever. The main word is denoiser. Just make sure it's on. If not, if you don't have it for whatever reason, you could just do like denoiser optics. Alright, so that's that. Alright, so I paused the video for a bit. I wanna kind of go reverse gear for a second, and the ambient occlusion, right? The contact shadows that it generates, the fake contact shadows. I want to set this back to 3. Okay. I want to show this. So I'm gonna push the frame count towards the end and do another render. This time with this render, right, the ball is at a dead stop, so there's no motion blur, and like I said, I dropped the samples back down to 3 for the ambient occlusion because I want to show this. Right. Save a snapshot. I'm gonna save this at AO samples at default 3. Okay. And then also write down camera AA sampling at 8. Alright, so this is the highest value for the render settings. This, right, is the lowest value or the default value for the ambient occlusion. Okay, now I'm going to set it back to 8 so you can see the difference. For the ambient occlusion, again, the samples for the ambient occlusion has to do with contact shadows, the quality of it. So okay, Control U. This is going to be with the ambient occlusion samples, right, set to 8. 8 is what I recommend. Don't make it higher than that because it will just increase your render times. It's just the right thing for me to show, the before and after, because before I had kind of skipped it thinking maybe it's not going to be a big deal, but for those that really care about it, I should show it. So this is again the ambient occlusion sample set at 3, right? It's selected. If I let go of this snapshot, it will show the most current render that I just did. Before, after. This is before, after. See? Cleaner. You guys might think, oh, what's the big deal? But again, right now it doesn't look like much, except for here. But if you have more and more stuff in the scene, more complicated things, it is a big deal. But just right now, it's just not showing as much. because I showed the same thing for the character turntable, and it clearly showed that I made a big deal. So again, it's just a review of what you have previously learned, right? And I'm just showing again, but just this time around, not as clear difference, except for here. See? Save it. AL samples at 8. Before, after. Yeah. Alright, so that's everything. So everything is nice. Lastly, this one over here, we're almost done. Now it's just a render sequence setup. Make sure it's at rendering. Go under the render sequence, option box, render sequence, option box. Right. Set this to perspective. That's what I chose. And then in here, file output, click on the folder. Right. My project was already set. Right. I named my project directly to ball animation. Basically, it's gonna want to save your image sequence of images. It wants to save it under your images folder, which is, I'm not gonna click it here, but your images folder, right? That's where it wants to save it. Or you can see I already have some set up. What you want to do is click on this folder icon, made a new folder. I'm gonna name it new ball sequence renders, right? Maybe I'll put I don't know, like lateral movement, because this animation exercise I showed about how to do lateral movement. So it's named, and then press enter to seal it. Now select it, hit select. Now you notice here, this is my folder. And then you hit render sequence. And then if I click it, you'll see what's gonna happen is that, well, before I even do that, you wanna save it, right? You wanna save. I'm just gonna increment save. Make sure, what I wanna mention, make sure to close this. There's a small chance it could do something stupid and freeze the system. There's a small chance. So I just closed it, and then you hit render sequence. When you do that, this window will pop up, right? It's slightly different from Arnold's render view. This render view is, I believe, Maya's render view, because there's Maya's render view and there's Arnold's render view, and it's processing, right, each one, and it's not going to let you do anything in terms of the Maya. See, it's set to the circling icon. See this one? You just leave it alone, let it render. Alright, so I paused the video for a bit. Here's my folder, right? Documents, Maya, projects, ball animation, images folder. Here's the folder that I made, new ball sequence renders, lateral movement. Here are the images, right? See, 0000, 0001, 0002, 0003, 0004. These are tips. See? And yeah, that's basically what that is. And like I said, this is assuming, not assuming, but assuming that you've done everything else proper for the other renders. For example, the turntables, yada yada yada, all the other tutorials and lectures that I mentioned, right? So what I'm saying is that I'm gonna stop this for right now. And the way you want to stop this, and this is good to know, is let's say if you're not happy with the render, right? Or something went wrong. You just press escape. So I'm gonna press escape right now. And that stopped everything. See? Escape. I'm gonna close that. Right? I wanna make sure that under the preferences, right? See the gearbox and the running man in orange. Time slider, right? I always want to make sure, well, because you know, there's a lot of students and you just never know. Time slider, frame rate 24 frames per second, like I mentioned in many other tutorials and lectures. Playback, 24 frames per second. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That and that. Because if you don't have this set, right, it's not good. And then render settings, right? Again, name TIFF, name dot number dot extension. Don't mess with anything else. Start and end frame, your renderable camera, and especially this 1080. And that's everything. So yeah, and then you take your image sequences, bring them into Premiere Pro, right? I repeat, into Premiere Pro. Make sure that your frame rate in Premiere Pro is set to 24 frames per second. I repeat, make sure to look and check that your frame rate in Premiere Pro is set to 24 frames per second. Because if not, it's gonna make the animation movie at 30 frames per second. So be aware of that. That's pretty much everything. Yeah, let me just double check. Yep, I covered everything. Alright, that's everything. Good luck and bye.